Right, so we'll start the meeting today for September 29th, 2022. First in-person meeting back, so welcome everybody. So we'll start off with the roll call. So I guess take yourself off mute, or I guess also take yourself off mute in person as well, and acknowledge your presence. Chris? Okay. Marlene?
Here.
All right. Andrew?
Which one?
Oh, Andrew E. Sorry. All right, David?
Here.
Nicholas?
Present.
All right, Brenda?
Present.
Katie?
Here.
All right, Tim? Okay. Danielle? And Brad?
I'm here.
And Andrew N.
Here.
Great. All right. Next, just want to go through the approval of minutes from August 22nd, 2022. Any questions, comments, corrections? Does anyone have any objections to approving the minutes? All right, hereby approve the minutes. Thank you very much. So today we'll be going through three agenda items: the Storm and Surface Water Master Plan, which is informational discussion item, the Hillside Park conceptual design recommendations, discussion and potential action, and the Community Investment Strategy update, which is discussion and also potential action. With that, we will turn it over to Gary with the Storm and Surface Water Master Plan.
Any audience comments?
Oh, yes.
Public comments first.
Public comments,
Yeah.
sorry.
It's all good.
Okay.
There was no one virtually.
There's no one on,
No.
anyone here? Public comment? No? Okay, all good, okay.
Okay.
Just get it dialed up.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem, thank you. All right, so no public comments, so should be all set to move forward with the Storm and Surface Water Master Plan.
All right, thank you, everybody. Just a test on the sound. Are we okay?
Yep.
Great.
Thank you. Gary Shimmick, I'm a utility strategic advisor part-time with the City of Issaquah Public Works. Some of you may have known me as the former utilities engineering and environmental programs division director, but I've moved on to a part-time role. And I'm here with Alan Quinn, our senior stormwater engineer, and two of our excellent consultants from OTAC to talk about our master plan. And I wanted to apologize that my camera is not working today. I've been working with our IT folks since 2 o'clock and we can't make it work. So go figure. Next slide, please, Alan. Okay, our purpose is working with you to take this quite long project that's been a great thing in the making towards the finish line. So what we want to do today is provide a summary of not only our final CIP list, but more importantly, how we got there. You'll recognize much of this from previous conversations, but this is going to encapsulate all we've done to get to this point and the next steps forward. Next slide, please, Alan. And again, we're really looking forward mostly to your thoughts on our methodology. That's what I'm going to focus on. We don't have a lot of time here. I'm going to go over a couple of the projects, but we can definitely seek more of your input on those specific projects later. But again, I really want to make sure everybody's comfortable here with the methodology we use to get to this point. Next slide, please. So we've been at this quite a long time. Some of the things have been out of our control, that little pandemic thing, but we did start this in December 2019 with a great kickoff meeting and a virtual outreach where we've had a lot of input, what we'll talk about. And then we did, the series of environmental board, park board, and council study sessions along the way. And our most recent conversations have been with the environmental board. And then we also did have a committee meeting with council last month. And we are here now to talk with you. And then the next step will be going to council for adoption. So our agenda, again, we'll talk a little bit about our final plan, the current schedule, the prioritization recap, which is going to be, again, a great part of this discussion, the stormwater management option screening, and the metrics for prioritization. Those last three are the key pieces. And then we'll just touch on the final CIP list and ask if we have any questions. So the plan. There is quite a bit in this plan that we've talked to you about for the last couple of years. There's going to be a section on existing conditions for both water quality, or for not both, but for water quality, habitat, and flow control. We have our list and metrics for our stormwater management options. Section on all the stakeholder engagement we've done, which we talked about. We'll have our final candidate project list, which is that SMO list. We'll have the schedule for implementation for those 10 projects, as well as the budget needs. And then what we're still working on is an adaptive management approach. If things don't quite go as planned with the projects, what are we going to do then? And then finally, we'll have a section on the basin prioritization and SMAP. And one thing to add that we just talked about today, we're going to have a section on all the operational elements that we're going to be probably talking to you about in 2023 related to stormwater. This is really a capital program heavy focus plan, but we'll be coming back and talking about things like street sweeping and other things we can do to enhance our existing system that's already built. Next slide, please, Alan. All right, so we're actually in last part of this. So you see the blue diamond for the Parks Board here. And as I mentioned, we just talked with the Planning Development and Environmental Committee earlier this month, and then the Environmental Board in July. And then the plan is to go to council adoption in November, December. We're currently, as you see in those boxes, in the SEPA review process, the ecology review process, and also the internal city review process. And really that blue box is really for that internal city staff review is listening to your concerns, your comments, as well as the committee's comments and the environmental board, and making sure we address those before the final product is completed. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the biggest slide, the most important one of the bunch. This really lays out our process, and I'm very pleased to present this. This has been a lot of work. A lot of you have been involved with this, and Jennifer has been representative parks all along the way. So we'll just kind of walk through this bit by bit. And again, this is what I, really looking for your feedback. So we started with 303 known options or known issues. Again, issues from community, from our administration, from staff, from other agencies. And these were, again, bunched into three things: flooding issues, water quality issues, and habitat restoration issues. Again, input at a real an in-person meeting, virtual meetings. But again, this is citywide. So what we did then to go to the 303 to the 41, and I know 41's an odd number, but that's just how it came out with our rankings. There were, I think, 3 projects tied, so 39, 40, and 41 were all together, so that's the odd number. But we had folks from across the city, and again, including Jennifer, but from at least 8 different departments across the city. We had external stakeholders involved as well. And we ranked each one of these projects, each 303, or issue, I should say, each issue to determine, according to, a wide swath of people, which ones were the most important. And again, we came up with a list of, our 41 highest issues from across the city. Again, so those are issues needing to be solved. The next step was, and this is where our friends at OTAC came in to help us with city staff as well, looking at how could we best address these 41 priority issues. And thankfully the number is lower, it's 23. So what does that mean? It means that a number of issues can be solved with each of these 23 projects. So you'll notice when I talk through some of the projects, they're multifaceted projects. So some of them solve flooding or are hoping to solve flooding, water quality, and habitat issues. Some just solve one, but I think that is a good thing that we brought that number down to 23 projects. What we did then, and we'll get to a slide on this, but we did share this with you before. We had a robust list of another ranking criteria for each of these projects that was approved by boards and by the council, and most importantly by ecology. So we ranked each one of those projects and with numerical scores, and what we came up with a list of 10 that were the highest priority that we like to solve over the next 10 to 20 years. And those years may seem a little high. Some of those projects may be solved rather easily, but some of them are very large projects that may take a very long time to develop and implement. Next slide, please. Again, we've seen this before, but just quickly, some of the metrics that we use to score those projects. The very first one actually came out of one of the, I have to look back at my notes, it was either the Parks Board or the Environmental Board, but effectiveness of solving problems, including impacts, benefits to Lake Washington, or I'm sorry, Lake Sammamish. And then we've kind of talked about some of the other metrics here, from constructability to timing to environmental and social justice. So every project was scored with these in mind. Next slide, please. So all of this resulted in 10 CIP projects, and the next step is going to be to finalize the concept design and cost for them. But there was a little one little step in between that. So next slide, please. This just go ahead. This just shows our basins. We can come back to that, but I'll pass over this through, given the time today. Let's go to the next slide. So an adjustment. So what we noticed when we looked at the 10 projects that scored the highest, right, with just true scores, raw scores, we noticed that a few of our goals from the beginning of the project were not met. There wasn't as much of a geographic diversity of the projects that we would have liked, and the variety of projects weren't as diverse. They really focused on water quality, and flooding and habitat were a little bit low on the list. So, and this is not uncommon. I can tell you that I've done this with a number of other organizations I've been with, and what we're doing is going from basically a project ranking to a portfolio ranking. So that's where we made a few minor adjustments, and we substituted 4 projects. Let me just say though, the projects that came out, they're still high priority, and we will still get to them at some point in time in the future. Next slide, please. And here's unveiling of our list. This is what we are recommending, again, to get into our CIP process over the next 6 years, 10 years, 15 to 20 years. Okay there?
All right, we're good.
We're good.
Okay. So again, we won't go over these all together, but what I would let you to draw attention to is, again, the variety of project types. We have water quality, a combination flooding projects, water quality projects alone, habitat alone, and then the different basins that we have. There's a citywide, but then also, Issaquah Creek, Schneider, Tibbetts, Park Hill, and Laughing Jacobs and Lewis. So we really felt that this is, getting to match our original goal of diverse project types and diverse basins. Next slide, please.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, we can go to the next one as well too. So I'm just gonna go to let's go to the Old Town slide, Alan. So I'm just gonna go over two projects in Old Town that I think will have, some of the most discussion here because of the multifaceted solutions we're trying to get at. So this is the first one is Old Town Targeted Basin Study and Plan. And let me first say that this is going to be in collaboration with our dear friends at King County Surface Water Management and the Flood Control District. So what we're looking at is major ways that we can address, in particular, the flooding issues in the the Old Town area, but also provide water quality and habitat. And one of the things that we have all learned through this project is that the regional work upstream in King County unincorporated area is something that the city can fund if there is a benefit downstream to the city, and that could be leveraged with additional King County dollars. So we're going to continue to work with them over the next couple years to identify a couple things. What are the best known risks for flooding in this area? They are currently underway with a new floodplain map, and they're also going to look at how the channel may move around during these big floods. So we can overlay their work with our existing and our known problems, and then work together to come up with ways in a regional way to address these issues most cost effectively. Okay, next slide, Alan, please. And again, another big one here is I would call this a subset of what we were talking about, but this is something we can do independently of the King County work. Again, this came through from almost everybody we talked to, the issues, especially the flooding issues and water quality issues around Old Town. Is there a way to construct a regional facility in the Old Town area that could both reduce the impacts of existing development and future development? Now, the one caveat here from our initial work, it would probably be a fairly large facility, about 2 acres. So we don't know if that's going to be something that's feasible, but we still want to look at that because that would be a great way, again, to leverage dollars, not only from our utility fund, but also from our development community. So these were 2 that I just wanted to highlight that were some of the biggest projects. And again, you can feel free to kind of really take a deep look at the other 8 projects that we have. And Alan and I, will take, questions tonight, but questions over the next few weeks if you have any concerns or questions about those. Because we are still, as I wanted to just point out, before we go back to council, for each of these projects that are on this list, we will have a little bit more defined scope and also a budget, so we can again put these in perspective into our CIP projects or CIP portfolio to get a feeling for to give the community and all of you a feeling for how we could deliver these projects, right? Because there are 2 key constraints. One obviously is the funding, but 2 is our staffing, that we're able to work, and it's not only public works staffing, but Jennifer's time and parks and other folks in the city that we really are going to have. It's going to be a team effort for all these projects. So we want to, develop a schedule that is realistic, that we can deliver on. So Alan, with that, I think you can go to the last slide, please, with questions or just what we were trying to wrap up.
So there's other projects, of course, but I don't know we have time to go through all the other projects. I think the first 2 are the ones I thought we felt most important from the park board's interests in terms of.
Right.
Yeah, so anyhow, but these are all, we can certainly,
Might be worth just talking through the game
Sure.
real quick, or just highlight.
I'll just quickly.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
Alan,
the next
please.
one. Yeah, so next one on the list, SP 228, 229th Avenue Southeast Water Quality Improvement Project. So basically, this is a nice map there, and this is an area where the North Fork of Issaquah Creek comes down the hill from up in the Highlands, and it's where right adjacent to the pit there, gravel pit, and as an area that has a lot of it's gravel parking area that trucks use and other vehicles use it, and the problem with that area is water comes down 220 229th when it rains, and it just causes a lot of sedimentation and turbidity issues, and it flows directly into the North Fork of Issaquah Creek. So we'd like to do a project there to stabilize that and prevent that erosion from occurring and causing sediment into the North Fork, which of course is we have salmon in Issaquah Creek we want to protect. So that's that project. Issaquah Hobart Road fish barrier removal. This one was a project that was identified fairly late, but one of the projects that was actually one of the sources of information for where we decided to do figure out our known issues was WWW, Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife. They have a database of all fish barriers in the state, and we looked at that database, and this was actually in that database, but it was shown as not as being repaired. And anyhow, I was out there with another staff member, and we observed that it's a barrier, it's a major fish barrier, and so we thought that would be a good project to do to open that up at the culvert, and so we can increase the fish use. Sammamish Cove Park and Stream Habitat Enhancement Project. This is actually a project that would work nicely with the Parks Department. This would be a channel restoration project along Schneider Creek at the outfall to Lake Sammamish, it comes in Lake Sammamish there at the Cove Park. So I believe that the Parks Department is doing some restoration there, or will at some point be doing some restoration along there, planting. So we would like to work with you all to do a stream restoration project there. So, and that also would work well with a WashDOT. They're doing a cove replacement of Schneider Creek. And so we would coordinate all the efforts with them because they plan on opening that up with a nice fish passable culvert across I-90. The Newport Way water quality retrofit. This is phase retrofit 1, we call it, oversized proposed road facility. So this would be a water quality treatment facility that we would work in conjunction with our transportation department. They're doing a corridor improvement project along Newport Way. And while they're doing their improvements, the road improvements, we thought that would be a good opportunity to collaborate with them and do a joint project where we could do water quality treatment above and beyond what they're required to treat. So East Lake Sammamish Parkway water quality retrofit. And here again, this would be a retrofitting. In that term we use to mean treating impervious surfaces, pollution generating, that are not being treated currently. And so we'd be putting in treatment facilities to treat East Lake Sammamish Parkway, which is a high use, high ADT, a lot of cars you travel, average daily trip. Thank you. So this would be a nice, we felt would be a good place to get a lot of bang for the buck for water quality treatment. And then Southeast 43rd Way roadway stormwater treatment facility. And here again, another type system where we would put it in retrofit treating areas that are not being treated currently on Southeast 43rd Way with using a variety of enhanced treatment facilities like storm filters, which we use in the city, so in other areas. And then West Lake Sammamish Parkway water quality retrofit, similar project, just retrofitting roadways to do additional treatment where there's currently no treatment. This would actually work well with WashDOT because they're replacing the Lewis Creek culvert across I-90, and we've been working with them, and they're aware of what we're trying to get their implementation schedule so we could maybe coordinate in doing, because they're gonna have to do some improvements on West Lake Sammamish Parkway as part of the culvert replacement project. So that's be the time to go in there and do some retrofitting while they're in there tearing up the road. SY4 programmatic fish barrier inventory and removal. So this would be basically a project to go out and investigate and inventory and then prioritize where we want to do some fish barrier removals, where there's culverts that are not fish passable or limited fish passable. And once again, that's using WWW's, they have their list of fish barrier culverts, and we would use that list and go out there and actually field verify what needs to be done and prioritize it. Actually, yeah, and this is just this is the same project basically. Just because now this is actually photographs of that project we talked about earlier that was a standalone fish barrier removal project, and you can see that's clearly a fish barrier on the left, top left there. So, and that would open up a lot of nice habitat for salmon upstream. So, okay, that's a quick rundown of those. So I guess, yeah, direction needed, feedback on the method. Well, so Gary, I don't know if you wanted to take this slide or.
Yeah, no, let me just, that was great, Alan. And again, we're looking for any just real major concerns or comments. It's positive as well on the methodology we used. Again, that's want to make sure that, you know, we did a robust process, a fair process to get to the projects and programs. And then any thoughts on those projects and programs. Again, knowing that this is CIP heavy, and we will be coming back to you to talk more about some of the operational work we're doing as Public Works, but across the city to also reduce flooding impacts, improve water quality, improve habitat. But this is kind of what we're looking for you now. So thank you.
I see Brad waving his hand.
I was gonna say, Zach, are you gonna take questions?
Brad?
So my question is, do any of these projects require some sort of an environmental impact review, or maybe most of them do? I don't know, but I kind of wanted to see about that.
Yeah, Alan, you can probably take that a little. You can probably nail that one.
Yeah, so every project we do will require, of course, going through the SEPA. So that's, you know, that'll require a SEPA process. And then, yes, there'll be, most of them require, if they're in water work, they're going to require, you know, a core permit and working with Fish and Wildlife and getting a hydraulic project approval permit with, you know, called the HPA. So yes, we will definitely be, that's a big part of all these projects will be the environmental review and,
The tribes usually.
and coordination with the tribes, Muckleshoots and Snoqualmie tribe as well. We bring them in early, so they can see what we're proposing, you know, early on in the design phase and make sure we address their comments. And we do with every project, every restoration project we do, so.
Yeah, and Brad, I'd just like to add that was one of the kind of the criterias during the screening. Is this project really feasible given, you know, potential impacts, including environmental? So like I said, we're going to go through the process, but we did take a little look at that because one thing we wouldn't want to do is cause more environmental destruction to get an environmental benefit. So we did at least look at that the first cut. So thank you for that question.
Kind of tied to that question, I know for the evaluation period and picking which projects, do we do any kind of post-project monitoring or seeing if the environmental impact was accurate, and does that help us drive for future projects and all that other stuff?
Sure, I can take that, Gary.
Yep.
So we have three types of projects. We have restoration, flooding, and water quality treatment. So the restoration projects, those are the ones where we do require, in fact, it's in our city code, that when we do a stream restoration project, let's say, where we're, you know, putting in side channels and backwater channels and all the large woody debris you may see in some of these restoration projects, we do require post-construction. When we put in plants, we have to make sure that those plants survive, right? We have certain performance standards we have to meet, like 80% survival rates, and they do get monitored for a 5-year period.
Some projects can be 10 though.
So, some can be 7. Yeah, I guess it seems like every so often those numbers increase. But I believe in our code, we require minimum 5-year monitoring of all of the native plants that we install for all these restoration projects to make sure they do meet the 80% survival rates, et cetera. Because yeah, we're putting all this money into it. We want them to survive and be, yeah, definitely. So. Yeah,
let me just add a little bit. I'm not sure who asked that question. I couldn't see it, but it's an awesome question. And I think, you know, where we're going to also be heading, and you're going to, you know, hear more about this and may have already, but just the asset management work at the city is, you know, making sure that we're doing a better job. You know, once we install some of these larger facilities, water quality or flooding, to be tracking them. And yeah, are they performing as designed? And if they're not, why? Just to make sure we are getting the value we expected out of them. So yeah, that we do that now to a certain extent, but you're going to see that even more and more with Public Works going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, question. So first of all, thank you for walking us through that. I also think, going through those projects really felt like we really prioritized a lot of the restoration and sort of habitat, which I think is important. I was just curious about, knowing that we're here at the Parks Board meeting, how many of these 10 projects really assist in sort of addressing flooding within our parks or usable spaces for parks and recreation?
I can take that briefly. Maybe Gary, you can chime in as well. But so these 10 projects, we looked at a whole bunch of projects, but some we took out because if they were being done by others or they're already in our CIP, the projects we're already planning to do, they weren't part of this list that we're going to implement. So it's sort of separate from other projects. And for example, there is a project in Tibbetts Creek. We're working with Child Unlimited. They're doing a study along Tibbetts Creek over by the manor, Tibbetts Manor, to look at the issue of there's a sedimentation basin in Tibbetts Creek, and that our maintenance department, they have to maintain that, spend tens of thousands of dollars every year to clean out that sedimentation basin. The other problem is that we're not allowing the natural recruitment of gravel through the system to keep flushing and providing fresh gravel for spawning fish downstream. So this study is to look at how can we improve the gravel recruitment downstream, not starve it, and thereby so using the material that we'd be pulling out for $30,000 a year in costs, get rid of the sedimentation basin and let the gravel move through, and then also at the same time look at the flooding issues that we're having down there, and we're working with the Parks Department because you have your master planning that you're going through with the Tibbetts Valley Park. And so we're working, and so we've been, Jennifer and I and Gary, we're plugged into that, and we're going to make sure the study works with what you're planning to do and how we can improve flooding at the park and improve fish habitat and reduce maintenance costs. So that's a good example of hitting all three of those. But that's a study that's, like I said, it's separate. It wasn't included in this because we're already doing it. So we didn't include those projects that are already ongoing or will be implemented next year or two. So, or budgeted, I should say.
Hi, Gary, Nicholas Lee here.
Hey there.
Hey, Gary. One of the prioritization criteria might have been around funding. You said you're going to explore that more later. Or maybe we can answer it here. I'm trying to understand if any of this aligned with projects that are in the STIP, which is a longer term look for transportation. A lot of the stuff looks like culvert work, roadway work.
Right.
Question 2 is, do any of these, or does our stormwater system have connection fees or impact fees or impact fees?
Great point. Let me do both of them. The first one is we absolutely looked. So there's the funding I was talking about was limited and kind of how do we kind of fund it in their CIP. But what we did, Nicholas, too, is one of the criteria was how can we leverage our dollars, right? So that's why you do see some of these projects on here when Alan talked about, oh, this might work well with the WashDOT project, right? This might work well with King County. So we did look at each of these, not all of them, but majority of them have some type of leveraging factor where either another agency could fund into it or that it could add on to what they're already doing. So that's that's the real cool part about this. We did have one multi-jurisdictional meeting, I think like in December or January, and a number of really good funding leveraging ideas came about. Second thing, we're going to be, we're pretty darn good at Issaquah looking for and going after and receiving grants, even just dedicated to stormwater. So we will continue to do that. And there may be other opportunities, especially when we talk about the parks and stormwater synergy, to go after grants maybe that we haven't been successful at before, but now that we're a little more coordinated, we could do better at. And then the impacts fees, no, for stormwater, we necessarily, we have our rates, right? So the rates really are our basis for it. But then when we talk about that one, I think it was the second project, the regional facility, that's where we could leverage development dollars as well. So instead of building something let's say 100 small facilities on developments across Old Town, we could pool that money together and build something larger. So that's another way we can just be creative with the funding. So, to answer that last part, yeah, no storm impact fees necessarily, but that is, part of our rate base is to get money to do projects like this. Does that hit that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all I was wondering.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
And Tim, I think I saw Tim's hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. I have just a quick follow-up, and you really just touched on most of the answer to what I was going to ask you, which really involved, partnering with the county, the state, and maybe the feds to pay for some of this. And do the projects you described sound terrific, but has there been any sort of filter passed through in terms of, funding? Do they fit inside the broad vision of the funding you think you can bring to the table to pay for it? Or is that not a filter you're really applying at this time?
No, Tim, that's a great point. On the latter part, yes, these absolutely can fit in, but it's a question of if we weren't to, look for, grants or, and we will actually be answering this question very specifically before we go to council, but let me just hit it now. If we didn't look for those regional, partnerships, the grants, this is probably like a 20-year endeavor, right, with these 10 projects, and some of them are very large. But what we're hoping to do by leveraging, the funding, getting additional grants, is bringing those years down where we can actually, do more of these projects in a shorter time frame. And I just want to highlight one thing, and I think we're going to be having a joint presentation at Environmental Board probably next year on this. But the partnership with King County is going to be amazing. I'm really excited about that. So again, I mentioned the floodplain mapping they're doing and the channel migration work, but there's also another arm of King County that many of you may be aware of, but the King County Flood Control District. There is current funding at an $800,000 level to start looking at coordinated projects between the county and the city in their CIP already. Now that's probably for, that sounds like a lot of money, but these are going to be some big projects. But that's in there already, and there could be more coming from that because the county council and the flood control district realize how serious of an issue flooding is on Issaquah Creek. So that's one, Tim, I think we all just want to keep looking at, and I'm really hopeful we can leverage that, and that will bring the time frame down from about 20 years, hopefully.
Hey, Gary, if I could just add to that real quick, and I think helping to answer your question, Tim. So the jurisdiction from whence I came, down in South King County, Kent, we did a lot of work with King County and the flood control district, and a lot of successful work around multiple benefits within that floodplain. So looking at how not only riparian habitat, flood control, but also recreational use can be accomplished through projects. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how, and exciting to see how opportunities might present themselves on Issaquah Creek.
And just like to add, we've already leveraged a fair amount of grant funds already for the project, like the Tibbetts Creek study that we had talked about earlier. That's being funded through a King County flood control grant. And we have 3 ecology water quality retrofit grants that we'll get started on, and that's retrofit Old Town. So that's definitely what we want to look for, is these leveraging all the grants out there for sure. So
great, thank you.
Just a brief comment. It's very apropos this showing up right before Salmon Days. So I just want to echo what Marlene said. This is the heart and soul of the community for some portion of us, anyways, from the environmental impact and taking care of the ones that can't take care of themselves. So
yes.
Well, just one quick thing I want to add on this along those lines. So the one is a restoration project that I'm managing. We're wrapping up construction. So it's the Lower Issaquah Creek stream and repair and enhancement project that's over by Costco. So it's in terms of opportunity or opportunistic, having it completed right at Salmon Days. And actually we saw fish coming up through the restoration area the last couple of weeks, and they're utilizing all the wood that we installed in the main channel. So if you ever go by the trail by Costco, where all the new headquarters buildings are being
Pickering Trail.
If you look across the creek, you can't miss it. It's just a huge backwater channel. The contractor graded outside channels. It's really pretty amazing. And we kept the majority of all mature trees in that area because they're all trees that were planted way back during the early 1900s, because it's all homestead sites that the city purchased the parcels, and we kept there's like a huge giant sequoia that we kept, and we kept most of the mature trees. So it's really neat to see these channels excavated amongst all the mature trees. So.
All right, any other questions, comments? All right. Looks like no other questions, comments, so we move on to Hillside Park. Thank you so much.
Alan, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Hi, everybody. Give me just a brief moment here.
Maybe while you're doing that, Jen, can I kick it off with a little intro?
Okay.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it.
Go for it.
No,
I
it's all
can wait.
good.
I
Hey.
can wait before I share.
No,
Go
share
ahead.
away.
And
Please.
just I wanted to let everyone know, if you need a restroom, it's over here, around the corner.
Yes.
Just, this is a new facility, so in case anyone.
Can we book the espresso room next time?
Is that
I walked in-
garage?
yeah.
Yeah.
I walked in there by accident, but this should be the room.
Yeah.
Wine and liquor.
Yeah. It's more for teen programming. So Hillside Park, so we're here tonight to talk through the conceptual design. As you know, we've had a number of conversations, and I guess want to set the context that if you remember with our park capital projects, we really have these three very distinct periods of time for a capital project. You have sort of your planning and conceptual work, then you go into design and permitting, and then you go into construction. What you're going to hear tonight, and I think the conversation tonight, I just want to set the context for, think of it as we're at a gate. We're at the gate of going from conceptual design, really working with the neighborhood, and a very emotional neighborhood that had a lot of different opinions to try and build consensus on a conceptual design. So tonight is really about the opportunity for that conceptual design to be actualized. You know, here's the consensus we found, and for you to consider taking action as we go from the gate of conceptual design into design and permitting. Design and permitting will have its own set of environmental related engagement and public engagement. But I just want to sort of remind you of the bigger context of a capital project. We're sort of going from this first phase to the second phase. And with that, Jen, please take it away.
All right. Well said. So Hillside Park, as you know, let me quick do this. Hillside Park, as you know, we had been working with the community over the past 2 years to come up with a concept to introduce play within the community. Through all of our engagements, there are these 9 large items that kind of came out as priority improvements, and that is make some enhancements at the entrance, engage in making the trails more accessible, add more tables and seating to the park areas, create a log climber and slide area, timber steps in an overlook area. Also improve existing trail connections to the neighborhood up through the cemetery here. Right now there's some use conflicts between the cemetery and visitors, people walking over graves, which is not good. And this work would help minimize those conflicts. And then also, we'd keep the existing backstop because the community really wanted to, and they also want to retain what we know as an active wetland as a play field. So we will be making drainage improvements for that to make that surface more playable year round for that. So we took all of these little points, and with the help of our consultant team, finished after a series of several meetings on sites, in person, workshops, and surveys, and come up with this layout. This is a perspective view, kind of standing at home plate, looking over to where the play areas would be. We have the sledding hill that the community wanted to retain. The entrance is kind of back over to the side. Tables and seating are going to remain about where they are right now, with an enhanced accessible trail that will get you all the way down to the play areas down here. And we have a swing with some log climbers and slides, and we would retain this open grassy area. There is a boulder that's very well loved as a gathering space, and that will stay the same as well. This is somewhat of a different perspective of the play area. You can see, keeping in with the natural theme, it was really important to the community that this fit within the natural setting of the park. It didn't violate the wooded feeling of the park, but still provides some opportunity for different elements of play while being visually, not visually impactful. You know, it's not bright colors, it's not metal, it's really items that fit within the natural landscape. And also we can soften some of that with little pockets of planting around the area. So when we put all these survey concepts out to the community, here's kind of what an aerial view of that space would look like. We received some really good feedback. When asked the final question, do you feel the final proposed concept balances the goals of preserving the natural character of the park while adding play amenities as well as trail and field improvements? From a very, what was diverse sense of what should happen out there, we have really come a long way, where 74% feel we have been able to reach that balance. 13% were mixed, but they were like, those were the yes, but answers, you know, they weren't hard yeses or hard no's. Like, I don't want a plastic slide, or I, you know, little things like that that didn't really sway. And then we had our no's as well. So.
And Jen, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I did break this up differently, didn't I?
No, it's okay. It's okay. No, so we sent you the actual survey responses earlier. Those have been on the website and posted on the website. But you'll notice within that survey feedback, we took a finer tooth comb than even that to sort of break down, okay, within those mixed responses, which way were those mixed leaning? Was it a mix of, yeah, I like most of it, but I really don't like this specific. So let's make sure we capture that as a mixed sort of trending towards yes, versus there were some mixed responses that were, I really don't like this, except for this one element, right? So it was more of a mix, but leaning towards a no. And so
Right.
You'll notice in the survey responses that you received, a little finer tooth breakdown.
Yeah, and I apologize, I pulled up, not the presentation that's in your packet, because the other slide, there is that additional breakdown in the meeting packet, so
I know, you get 70% yes and anything, you guys like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we did a
Yeah,
little
just-
different breakdown, so I think collectively, what was it, Jeff? It's 86% were on the, you know, mixed,
Leaning towards
yes, positive side, and then the other percent was, the 14% were in the mixed no.
We had more than that
category,
when we started
so.
that didn't want anything, so.
True. So I apologize, I pulled up the wrong slide on this. That is my bad. But the right one is in your packet. So with that, kind of what's next, as Jeff said, we're kind of in that next gateway. We are wrapping up the conceptual design, which is the green item here, where that's where we really work diligently with the community. And then as we move into design and permitting to start creating construction documents, that's when me and the consultant team kind of turn our backs and we do a lot of work getting some of that detailed design so we can get a design packet and construction documents together to then submit to the planning department so we can start going through the active permitting process. And as Jeff mentioned earlier, as part of that process, we'll also have to do environmental review, and we'll have a neighborhood meeting as well, solely to talk about the environmental impacts. And we'll also start working with the outside agencies in that permitting process as we go to mitigate the wetland and find sites to include for mitigation areas.
And with mitigating that critical area, you'll see on this calendar, we're anticipating a full year of permitting, all of 2023 to get through that. Just trying to be realistic in that regard.
So with that, next year would be finish design, permitting, and then hope we'll start construction in 24.
Could you, I'm sorry, I missed some of that. Could you say again why we're needing the mitigate? Is it because of the drainage work?
So the play field right now, when we went out to the community, everyone's like, the grass is always wet in the wintertime, what can we do? And so we're like, let's check it out. So we checked it out and come to find out it's a depressional wetland.
Okay.
Isolated.
Because we're gonna drain it off essentially.
It's isolated. It has been in that form for 40, 50 years. That field has been there as is. And so it is just one of those things that over time, we live in a wet area and depressions change. And so we found out to our surprise that it was a wetland in the middle of what had been used as a playfield. So we're having to mitigate for that because the community would like to keep it.
Yeah, and those that were here last year, and forgive us new park board members, last summer, we had a long conversation with the neighborhood around, given this wetland realization, right, that a functional playfield and a wetland can't live together. So really, hey neighborhood, what is the priority? Do you want the function of that field? And if so, we're gonna need to mitigate. We're gonna need to take this wetland and have it environmentally function better somewhere else. And really overwhelming response from the neighborhood was that field's important. That play field's really, really important to the neighborhood. And so that set into motion this pretty extensive mitigation process.
Because it's not just the wetland itself that you have to mitigate for, it's also the 75-foot buffer around that wetland that you also have to mitigate for. So that would have really taken up almost the entire park space.
It started as let's set up play structure and then turned into like, oh no, it's a wetland.
I know.
Honestly, I mean, I think just putting my parks hat on and I think Hillside Park is such a wonderful space, and really the goal is how to preserve that natural informal feel, but as something that have functioned as an informal park for decades, right? Sometimes these kind of things happen as you consider adding an amenity or looking at an amenity, or hey, we want that field to function better. That field doesn't drain all that good, so make it drain better. Well, as you discovered, to have it drain better, the reason it isn't draining so well is it's a critical area that has to be addressed. And so it's almost this discovery phase of still keeping that neighborhood park natural and very informal, but I think finally allowing it to function as a neighborhood park is it requires some of this work. So you're right. What started as looking at play is doing a whole lot more to this park. If I could add one more comment before we go into discussion. So another thing that we've done, and I mentioned last month, is through this process, we've been looking at budget. And so city council, as sort of the overseers of the budget, as part of the mayor's proposed budget for 23-24, we are requesting an additional $900,000 for this project. That $900,000 really, as we've been talking with our environmental consultants and with the Department of Ecology and some of the other permitting folks, trying to get a sense of what full mitigation is going to look like. and building in some funding there. We've also learned from Blackberry Park and that construction happening, the cost of materials and cost of labor have gone a little higher than what was estimated a year or two ago. So we built that inflationary reality into that budget request. So
And permitting fees as well.
and then permitting fees that are
For
going to
all the
go with
different
a
agencies we need
right.
to go through, as well as our own.
right multiple checks to multiple agencies. Yeah, become a reality. So all of that is, as we're looking and considering this schedule of 23 permitting, 24, that budget request is going forward to make sure this project is funded.
It's a good time to need to draw down on reserves.
Yeah.
So with that, as Jeff mentioned, all of the survey responses are on the project webpage. I sent them out to you tonight. They were meant to be in the packet, my apologies. But we'll add them as the minutes, but they are on the webpage already, should you care to take a look at them. So with that, open it up for any board discussion regarding this project before we move into that next phase, should you want to take action?
I'll just add a quick question, if I could, real
Yeah.
quick. So where does the mitigation process fit into like the timeline with regards to like construction? Does the wetland have to be mitigated prior to the breaking ground in the construction, or is that something that will happen after the fact?
No, it's a great question. We'll learn more through the permitting process, but any work we do on the field drainage improvements, we need to mitigate, have it mitigated at first. And so I would imagine, depending on where the location of that mitigation is, right, we'll sort of sequence the construction of that accordingly based upon the permit requirements.
Yes. I'm not sure. I think I saw Brad has his hand up.
Thanks. I actually have a couple questions. One relates to the trail through the cemetery, whether, kind of what's the status of that and whether that's going to be a separate issue or whether that's going to be a part of the whole project of the redevelopment of Hillside Park. My next question relates to surveys, and I don't know if there's any way that this can happen or did happen. I didn't look at the last packet that came out because I didn't have a chance to yet. But this is a community park and not used by much of anyone other than people that live around the park. Even though I live on Squaw Mountain, I don't really ever go up there. And so I think that the survey should be weighted rather heavily on people that live around the park and use the park. And my question is was there any way that was weighted in the survey to isolate the people that actually use this park?
Who we sent the survey to? Do you want to answer that one first, Jen? Then I'll handle the cemetery question.
So with the help of our communication department, through our public engagement process, I have a list of contacts of people who have sent emails or attended meetings throughout the years, going all the way back to 2014 when we had our first neighborhood meeting up there. And so I've been building those contacts. So I have been sending, every time there's any engagement, I've been sending them the information, as well as our communications team has been targeting Squaw Mountain and that neighborhood for feedback on that. While it is posted for the community, it really has been more of a neighborhood focused public engagement.
So the survey itself was pushed to that neighborhood.
Right. And then to your other question, Brad, I'm sorry, what was it?
The cemetery.
Oh, cemetery. Yes, we did go to the cemetery board and chatted with them regarding the trail connection. They expressed a few concerns, which we've been able to, bring forward, and we'll work into our designs. We also sent letters to all the neighbors that abut the cemetery, letting them know that this trail would be placed in there, and of all of the neighbors, I think Brenda, you were one of them that might have gotten a letter from me. We received no comments back or inquiries regarding that trail connection and where it was going to go. We provided a map as part of that communication.
So specific to your question, Brad, the intent is that trail link. So again, forgive me, I was out of the room, but the trail is trying to solve a historical conflict where people wanting to access the park are walking through the cemetery and literally through the cemetery grounds. What's being proposed is utilizing the 50-foot buffer that the Upper Hillside Cemetery can't build in, but that 50-foot buffer, which is a portion of the park, and having a trail go through that. So separating this conflict of recreational use and cemetery customers. And so that project will be part of this project, Brad. It would be one and the same, and we'll continue to keep the cemetery board in the loop on that project, and making sure, again, we're seeking to solve a historical conflict by moving that trail.
Thank you for both.
Oh, sorry, Brad.
It was good.
Okay, Tim?
Thank you. And I appreciate all the work that's been done on this. This is a issue that's very near and dear to my heart. Part of the reason I joined the Parks Board, it's a block from my house. I'm down there twice a day. I talk to the people, I see what goes on, and there are several points I'd like to bring up. First, if some of you haven't been to the park, I invite you to just go to the park, go look at it. And I think if you do that, you will see that this big open field, of course, a big wide open grassy field on this mountain is not natural. At some point, all the trees were cut, the stumps were pulled, it was graded, and it was graded improperly. It drains back on itself, basically. You can just stand there and look at it and be like, oh yeah, they didn't grade it right. And that created the wetland situation, which I think surprised everyone when they did the study, that this improper grading created what is now by definition, a wetland. But that's what it is. But when you go to the park, what I invite you to do is stand outside the entrance and look. And what you'll see is two things. One is there is no parking other than on the street in front of people's houses. There's not a small parking lot. There's not a large parking lot. There's not a parking lot nearby. There's just parking in front of people's houses. And I think that really needs to be kept in mind, that this is a walk-in park. There's not even sidewalks. You might think, well, kids can go down there and play. There's no sidewalks on the street for kids to safely get down there. You got to walk through the street. Okay. I think what I'm getting at with this is, while I think the design is beautiful, I think it's going to create more traffic coming in there. And what we're going to be faced with is a lot of irate people that live on that street. I think it's Mount McKinley, that have people parking in front of their houses consistently. Just tonight, I walked down there about an hour before the meeting, and there were a few families down there practicing some flag football routines. There were 3 cars parked right in front where it says no parking allowed, because that's the only place there was for them to be. So I think we have to be very careful about making this look pretty and make it attractive, making it a place that more people want to come to, because you can't really get there unless you walk in. So I think it's kind of lost in the discussion many times, but I think for people that live very close to the park, it's a very important piece of it. One of the neighbors that lives 2 doors from the park happened to be out this evening as I walked by, and I just asked him, I said, what do you think about that? He said, I think it's a terrible idea. I said, well, why? He said, because where are they going to park? They're going to have people coming here, and there's no place for them to park. So I want to put that out there. The second thing is, I think, there's a whole science and art form around survey questions and asking the right question to get the information that you really want. And I think the question that we asked was important, but is incomplete, because it says, does it balance the nature and the play? There's something about balance in there. It doesn't say, is this design what you want. You're extrapolating that to say 75 to 85% of the people, this is what they want. They didn't say it's what they want. They said they think it balances it. And I wonder if you showed them the existing proposal along with an identical proposal, but no play structure. So a lot of the attraction goes out of it, but the trails are improved, the wetlands mitigated, the trail through the cemetery is completed, but that magnet for families to come with their kids is taken out. What would they pick? So I would say be careful how we extrapolate the answers to that one question that ask about balance and not about, is this what you want? So I don't know how that would come out. I know there's been a lot of community engagement. I know that Parks Board and Jennifer and Jeff, they've bent over backwards to talk to people. But personal feedback from someone that goes there all the time and talks to people is just about flipped on what you just described. Most people I talk to are like, yeah, I don't think so. So I have to put that out there. Like I said, I'm there all the time. And I just think these are perspectives that could slip through the cracks, and we need to think about it before we go ahead and push it in through permitting and make a decision. So that's it. I'm done.
Makes sense. Marlene?
Thanks.
It's hard to.
Yeah, it's hard to I'm gonna respectfully make a counterpoint to some of the things that Tim brought up. I think when we talked to people in the neighborhood in that last summer, right, there was definitely that issue of parking came up, right? And I think that is interesting. However, I also think people don't own the parking on a city street. So I cannot control who parks on my street. People park in front of my house all the time. Like, that's just part of being part of a community. So I think, I think there are people bent out of shape about people parking on their street, but I'm not sure that that's really, they don't own that street. I also live in a neighborhood that has an HOA and we have a private park, right? So I also feel like in a private park environment, we have much more control over how we want that park to be used. Here we have city dollars in a public park. It's not a private park for that neighborhood. So I think we need to think about, how does the entire community utilize that space? So I think there are always going to be the folks who don't want anything to change. There are also going to be the people who want to utilize public amenities. So we need to balance those two things out. So just to offer a counterpoint of somebody who also lives on the mountain and whose kids use that space.
I just want to add one point. Though there's one main entrance to the park, that's where the park naming sign is. Other neighborhoods within the area do have access to this park via trails. So they are able to come down their streets and do access from various areas within the park. And this is the closest play area other than Tibbetts Valley Park for the neighborhood. So just to bring that up.
And
one of the surveys said that too. It's ask how you got there and what different routes they took.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
Nicholas, did you have a?
Yeah, so I also happen to live on Squawk Mountain. There's a lot of us here apparently. I had no idea. I'm on the side that's closest to the fish hatchery. So like not really anywhere near this. And yet my kids walk to this park. They walk without me there regularly. It's on their path to go visiting other people they know. Mm-hmm. I guess it's dangerous. I feel like there are sidewalks. But certainly one of the reasons when I first discovered the park, I found it on a Google map. Mm-hmm. And, I was surprised it was there, to be honest, because you can't see it from anywhere. And I went to go find parking and found not a lot. And so I decided we should just walk from now on. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how we use it. So just, I'm another neighbor. I live I think it's probably half a mile to walk there. One of the things I did want to make a comment on is I think I remember somebody coming to the Parks Board and commenting about this park being a more regional trail connection between the 3 different mountains as kind of a node or a hub where it may connect down to power line trails or something that gets over to Cougar somehow. Am I misremembering that?
No, David Kapler with the Issaquah Alps Trails Club, I think,
Yes.
spoke to some of the bigger connectivity opportunities up and over Squawk using the power lines, some of the other trail connections planned near Tibbetts Valley Park. So, yeah, I don't know that I would categorize it a hub, but there are trail connection opportunities as we start looking at Squawk and trails up and over Squawk.
Not this park though.
But not this.
Okay, I thought he was in.
This park could be a sort of pearl on that necklace,
Okay.
right? But it wouldn't be a trailhead or, anything that would require those kind of facilities.
Okay.
Because again, it is a walk-in park.
Yeah, I just thought that was really interesting when he said it. And also, just before, shut up here, Tim, to your point, it's not always awesome to have people in your space when you don't want them there, but how much is too much? Yeah, I mean, I share my cul-de-sac with a bunch of folks and we got cars coming in all days and I don't say anything to them because I figure they'll be there until they want to leave and then they'll go away. So.
I really appreciate the discussion, Tim and Marlene and Nicholas as well. This is a neighborhood park like this is a real balancing act. And I hope what we're demonstrating and to whatever degree we're moving into the next phase, we really are trying to respect and understand and acknowledge this is a walk-in park. And so as we think of scale of play and scale of amenities, this is really of a scale that is not meant to be a city destination. It's not meant to be a community park. It's really meant to be of a play scale that really supports the neighborhoods that surround that park. And really, with that 40 acres, there are a lot of different neighborhoods that are within walking distance of that space. So we're really trying to find that sweet spot of really hearing and respecting both of those really important perspectives.
I think it shows in that a year ago, they were more 50-50.
Right.
And for us to get to 75-25, we'll count the whole other group as 25, that's big improvement. And I'm quite impressed that we have that. You have balanced it so well that many people are agreeing.
Trying to find that consensus. Yeah.
Chris, did you have a comment, question?
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking it might be good, Jennifer or Jeff, if you could provide just a quick summary, the status of existing trails that enter the park, that connect to it, and how many of those are official or formal, and is there any part of the plan either now or in the future to formalize what might be informal? Part of it is to maintain its accessibility to the people that live immediately around it, who use it the most, but also to disperse some of the load, of people that might drive to visit or walk or whatever. And I know that just from where I live on Squawk Mountain, just a little further up, we have access to some of the Squawk Mountain trails. And we get people that come and park, and most of the time, almost all the time, it's never been a problem. But I also understand the sentiment of, who are these people that aren't normal to my neighborhood parking here, and what are they, are they up to no good, or are they're just going to enjoy the trails that I like to enjoy? So I guess maybe a little info about the trails specific to this area would be great. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that question, Chris, and it I guess tees up what I was going to say in the director's report under the budget. So those of you that are budget wonks and love diving into 60-page proposed budgets, I got a cheat sheet for you. So one of the capital projects on page 74 is called the Hillside Park Loop Trail, and so we do know there are a number of informal, wherever some of those street ends on the south side of the park, there have been sort of makeshift trail connections, neighborhood connections that have been made. You might recall a couple months ago, we recently made a pretty strategic purchase of 1.5 acres on the east corner of Hillside Park that creates another opportunity for a spur trail connection in. Our partners at Public Works just completed a sewer line or a water line. I'm not sure which of the two lines. One of the two lines, sort of on the eastern end, the lower hill of Hillside Park. So all this to say is we've seen all this happening and made some of these acquisitions. What we're proposing with that project is to finally formalize a loop trail around the entire park and really allow that loop trail to become that connection. And imagine the loop with a bunch of spokes that come off of it. So there are ways to connect to that loop on the southwest corner of the park, and on the actual, Hillside Park portion of the park, and solving this conflict with the cemetery so that there's recreational use around the Upper Hillside Cemetery without conflicting with the cemetery. There really is some opportunity that's beginning to coalesce to formalize that loop trail. The request is for some design money in 23, and then some construction money in 24. So a way to sort of take that work and that thought and align it with this project to hopefully support some of that neighborhood connectivity around the 40 acres.
Which would make it easier for walking.
Exactly. So really
right.
supporting that idea of further walking into this recreational space.
Yeah, just one final comment on the parking. So I don't live on Squawk Mountain. I live on Cougar Mountain.
So you're gonna drive to this park all the time.
Yeah, if you put in parking, it becomes a destination park. And I, living on Cougar, will think, oh, there's 10 spaces, I will have parking there, so I'm gonna go there. So you might invite even more people to come to your community by building parking in there. So just a comment on that.
Versus walk-in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
But I would say, I think as a park board, I think one of our goals is to get more people outside and using parks.
Sure.
So I also don't want to be like, oh, let's try not to make people use a park. That's great. Like, we don't want to spend $900,000 to have a whole bunch of people not use a park. Like, that's not our goal. Right. So I think to your point, like, yes, it is definitely used by the neighborhood mostly, but I also don't think we want to be exclusionary. I mean, that's a beautiful park. If you haven't been there, you feel like you're in the woods, but there's a beautiful, like, field to play at. It's really unique and beautiful. And I think protecting that character while allowing more people to use it in a way that is thoughtful to the neighborhood, I think is what we're trying to achieve.
Have you ever discussed a gondola?
Yeah.
No,
Jeff,
So
I have a question about how this whole process actually initiated, because I'm not sure. When, in the very beginning, did the neighborhood come to the city and say, we want play equipment in? Or did the city come to the neighborhood and say, do you want play equipment put in? I don't know the answer to that.
So it sounds like there was engagement. This predates me, but in 2013, 2014, there were neighborhood conversations about what to do with Hillside Park. There were a number of requests by the neighborhood, trail improvements, field drainage, some of the vegetation, clearing that, as well as play. This idea that, hey, all these new parks that are being built over at Issaquah Highlands and other places in town have a play area. This park doesn't. I know, even as I look at the notes from those meetings, that created a little bit of neighborhood tension, as some residents near that park really wanted a place for their kids to play, and others said absolutely not. And so the origin of this conversation, this project, was really born out of that work. City council members, some who live on Squawk Mountain, hearing and being aware of that project, really saw this as a priority to how to incorporate the appropriate scale of play into this neighborhood park, like is provided for other parts of Issaquah.
Okay, thank you. And I just, for the record, I just think we need to remember that kids have been playing at that park for generations. And so when we say incorporating play, we're talking about putting in designated playground equipment. The woods and the rocks and the fields have been used for play for generations. But
Of course, absolutely.
Danielle, did you have a comment, question?
Yeah, I've been on the park board since probably 2000, 5 maybe, and this is the third or fourth time that we've talked about this. So it's come up a number of times over the years, and from the community.
When you say this, Danielle, this being
Improving Hillside Park.
park amenities?
Yeah, park
okay.
amenities, getting, play, improving the park, and in the same way that we have made other improvements to other neighborhood and community parks over the years. So, and we've gotten to a point where people just kind of get into a stalemate and then nothing happens. So yes, people have played in there for generations and years, but there's also been a desire over the years, far back as 2005 at least, to do something about it. So,
It'll be their kids
that we're
before
doing
we
it.
know it if we don't make a decision.
All good points. Wow.
Are we prepared to make a decision as a Parks Board with regards to, moving forward with this concept design?
I would like to make a motion to move forward with the concept designs as presented by the park committee.
I'll second.
Okay, so I guess we'll take a vote to everybody who's interested in having this concept design be proposed. Raise your hand.
We could invite discussion. What's that?
Do you vote? I can't remember.
I would suggest taking a moment for discussion and also getting clarity on who's voting before the vote's taken.
Okay.
So, yeah. Motion's on the table, open it up for discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further discussion with regards to the motion?
Could I add one thought just to the motion? Friendly amendment suggestion, knowing again, this is conceptual design. But if you are supporting this conceptual design, maybe in the motion, understanding that it's moving forward into design and permitting. It's not, you're not taking an action tonight that's going to construct this. Just as a point of clarity.
Do I need to repropose the motion? Or is it just more
friendly? Yeah.
Maybe do you want to restate
Can I amend
it and I'll make sure I have it
Okay.
Thank you,
documented as well.
Tricia.
Okay. Well,
The
thank
clerk
you,
rocks.
Tricia.
The clerk
Right.
rocks.
Okay, so I would propose a motion to move to concept permitting. Is that what it is?
How about, can I suggest
Yes,
this?
please,
How about, the park board supports the concept design and moving it forward into design and permitting?
Can I say what he said?
I mean, does that fit?
Yes. More eloquently than me, for sure. Thank you.
Okay, I will second.
And another second, right?
And any further discussion with the rephrasing?
And Tisha, given we have people here and on the screen, how would you suggest taking is it a show of hands or?
So I'd like to confirm I have this right. I believe is Nicholas excused? Oh, Nicholas is here. Okay, so are we missing, who is our absent member?
We're missing
Andrew. Andrew E is the only.
Andrew E. Okay, so that means we have one regular member who's not present. So we will need one alternate to vote. We have 3 alternates present. So there isn't a precise process for determining which of you. We could default to the person in the room, which could be one approach. Which would be Andrew. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so I might suggest that as one option, and then it might be nice to call everyone's names just because we our mixed attendance tonight.
Sure, okay.
Let me know if you want me to help with that.
Or I can call the names,
Great.
okay. So, no further discussion with regards to that. I'll move forward with taking the vote. So when I call your name, please just say whether you are in favor of the proposed motion or against. Chris?
I'm in favor of it.
Okay, Marlene?
In favor?
Okay. I'm in favor. Andrew?
Yes, in favor.
Okay. David?
Yep.
All right, Nicholas?
Support.
Okay. Brenda?
Yes.
All right, Katie?
In favor?
Okay. Tim?
I'm against it.
Okay. And Brad or Danielle, as alternates, did we
I think it's
default to
alternates, did we decide?
Andrew?
We got one.
Or Andrew, I think.
Yeah.
Isn't it in the room?
And
I would,
Andrew.
I
Room,
would
so,
revert
okay.
to the one in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right.
So I'm sorry, Chair, can I confirm, so did David vote?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
you're a yes?
Yes.
And then Andrew Myers,
Yes.
and you're a yes as well? Okay, so just for the record, that was 8 yeses, 1 no.
8-1, yeah.
So the motion passes.
That sounds good. Thank you, everybody, for the discussion. Again, as this passes this gate and now moves into design and permitting, there will be a lot of design work that's going to happen, but as we get an understanding of the permitting path, as Jen mentioned, we are going to now be entering permitting process with Army Corps of Engineers, with State Department of Ecology, and with our own permitting department. So we've already begun some of those conversations to figure out what that maze looks like. We'll certainly keep you informed as we get in a good idea of what that calendar looks like. Also making sure as we get design details and understand what those agencies prefer us to do mitigation sites, how we do mitigation, making sure we keep you all informed, but we've made a really firm commitment to keeping that neighborhood informed as those details move forward. Part of the city permitting process, there is a environmental meeting that we'll need to, as the applicant, as the developer, will host an environmental meeting once we really start to have all those details put together. So more work ahead.
And at that meeting, our consultant teams are there to help answer any technical questions or detailed elements that may arise.
I think Danielle had her hand up.
Danielle, did you have a comment?
Yes, just before we completely move on, I just want to, and I kind of feel like a broken record here, but just in respects to what Tim had spoken about, the surveys, I would really, really love it if surveys could be previewed by the park board when they go out to the whole community, because I feel like it's a consistent theme over the years that when we get survey results back, there are questions that perhaps we would be asking to help instruct our decisions, or like follow-up questions and whatnot. So if there's any way to sort of preview those surveys, I think it would be really helpful for all of us in making our decisions, better informed and easier to make.
Great, thanks for that.
All right. So moving on, we're a little behind schedule.
Yes,
for
we
the
are.
discussion.
So this is another big topic, so I will do my best. Hang on just one moment while I share my screen. So this is the community investment strategy in your packet tonight. Oops, I'm sorry. So as we had talked about last month, council has asked us to come to you to help figure out some criterion and provide some rationale and feedback as to how we might invest $4 million of ARPA, which is the American Rescue Act, or American Rescue Plan Act dollars into the park system. And so through that, City Council will have further discussions as part of the budget process going on. And at our prior meetings, we had talked about the criterion. You as a board had created an ad hoc committee that has been really active and meeting over 4 times to help get us to what we're going to be presenting tonight. But we had ended up creating a matrix with some of these criteria and really digging in on all the potential projects, the project level of readiness and critical areas, economic benefits, community access, what are our connections to other parks, phasings, and multiple other considerations that we need to include, including providing year-round impactful park elements into our city system.
And I thought a really good discussion, not only with ad hoc, but the full park board at the meeting last month in terms of the matrix.
Right. And speaking of, here's a picture of that matrix. And we are going to be, this is a rolled up summary. At the last park board meeting, you had asked for a few little tweaks to be made, but this is the rolled up. The full exploded matrix is in your packet, but this is a rolled up matrix of all the different categories I mentioned as far as a criterion, and using a green light, yellow light, red light scenario, kind of what's green being easy or readily achievable, yellow, there's some hurdles, but we can still do. You see one kind of orange, lighter orange color in there under Issaquah Creek Corridor. That means a little more complicated, but not quite a full red. And then we have items that were red or very difficult for us to achieve at this very point in time. And so at the end of our last meeting, we really decided to focus on 3 different parks, and that was Veterans Memorial Field, which included the Senior Center, Depot Park, and Pedestrian Park, as well as the Issaquah Creek Corridor and Confluence Park.
I just have one quick comment there.
Please.
And this is just, it's more administrative.
Yes.
If we're doing green, yellow, red, if we just put G, Y, and R maybe in the matrix. So if you're color blind, you can.
Great suggestion. Yes.
Yep, really good point. You're right.
Some of the additional considerations, as discussed in the ad hoc committee, as we started working on each of these park spaces, is really, what is the visibility of the project? Is it only serving a few user groups, or is this really a community-based? Also, really, what is that level of impact versus level of effort? Is this project going to have some long-term economic benefit? Is it going to stimulate the need for other projects and really be that stimulus to help get other projects built and funded as kind of a one thing leads to another? And then also that year-round use. So with that, and we got together with Mithun, who is our consultant team assisting us, and we came up with some narratives for each of the projects kind of in that matrix criterion at the very bottom. You'll see in some of the early work we had done some elements that would potentially be in and out of each of the park spaces, included or not included. With work with the ad hoc committee, we were able to focus in on a few of those elements to create concepts for each of these parks. These are just first blushes at what these could bring. So first we're going to talk about Confluence Park, and I am just going to read the summary. Is Confluence Park, the play area nearly triples in size to accommodate a new signature play structure and additional elements, expanding the existing leaf-shaped motif with 2 new play areas and nature-inspired components. The existing play boulders are relocated throughout the play and new picnic areas for climbing and seating. The Eck House will be thoughtfully reimagined into a picnic shelter as a functional park amenity. History of the site will be recognized and celebrated in a variety of ways. A new large picnic area between the play zone and the Eck House is shown in leaf shapes with specialty paving and a new tree. Additional improvements include new edging along the main 12-foot gravel paths, lighting, and the main neighborhood connection from Third Court to Rainier. All play areas are carefully designed to avoid impacts to existing trees. And with that, we have two projects shown here. This is the Confluence Park at large. There has been several projects that have occurred here over time. Some of the remaining work is the lighting, which you see from the parking area. If you can see my little hand down here from the parking area, finishing that up to the buffer where it is already, and then continuing it from this trail out to Rainier. Also, the main 12-foot trails that are in the park, which are the main thoroughfares or veins of access routes, those would receive some edging material in order to help the gravel and mowing and really give it a little more cleaned up look and definition. I'm going to go, this project right now is around collectively 2.8 to 3 million. This next slide really focuses in more on the play zone. There is future parking that is not part of this project, that is part of Greater Street Transportation Future Project. But these areas highlighted are the impact areas. So this is a new playground that is there now that would remain undisturbed.
The existing, yeah.
Or the existing playground. Well, it was new back in 2016 when we put it in, and it's still new to me, but it's there.
That's the one that's there.
It's there.
Nice.
So as we look at reimagining the Eck House, it would much be like the existing picnic shelter out there is memorable of the Anderson old barn that was out there, the roof line, the structures. There's actually even some old lights that are remnants of the barn that they were able to salvage and reuse. So we do much of the same here, maybe keep a face of the Eck House, build out a roof and a picnic area, salvage a few items, and be able to use this more as a gathering space out in here. We'd add in some additional patio and seating areas over in this area here. And then as we reach into the play zone, we'd really start creating some more active expanded play areas and a leaf shaped patterns and enhance those spaces with vegetation, but also ensuring that they're all handicap accessible for these areas. So that is somewhat of the refined concept for Confluence. We are going to go on to the dog park. Much has been learned during the community discussions about the dog park and the recent pop-up dog park tours. Given a variety of land constraints within our existing park plans, completing one off-leash dog park area is currently difficult. Rather, with this proposal, recognizes that the community is in need for construction of multiple smaller dog parks throughout our city system. This dog park concept provides nearly 1/3 of an acre of dog park play space, including a separate area for smaller shy dogs. The park is conveniently located just south of Old Town, where it can utilize the existing community center parking. An improved gravel path connects users to a new car wash station, double gated paved entrance. A bench and drinking fountain are just inside the main play area. Synthetic turf is used as a surfacing to promote sanitary conditions and as well as easy maintenance, with dog bark servicing at the southern end where among the trees were to provide a little more rustic natural area. So with that, I see we had an extra water in there. We're gonna have water at the site for the dogs. I'm surprised I didn't catch that. So here it is here. This is the existing community center parking up there. And this is this is the Rainier Trail that comes down here. And then right down at the bottom here is where there's a trail back up to Second and the schools. So the dog park would be nestled in the space it currently is. If you haven't been there right now, it's just down the way. But we'd expand this a little bit. Right now, there's no Shire small dog area. We would include that and have a separate fenced area for that. And then make a large open improvement area here using the artificial turf surface, and then bark out amongst the trees here. We'd have trash and recycling, have a service gate, and a paw wash station over here. All of these improvements would run in the range of $600,000 to $650,000. Now this is the big one, and bear with me as we go through this. Veterans Memorial Consolidated Park, located in the heart of Old Town Issaquah along Creek Corridor. Renovation of the consolidated park spaces promotes civic gathering, connection to commerce, and begins to unify disjointed public spaces. Specific features of each space are at pedestrian park. The new pedestrian park welcomes visitors from the corner of Front and Sunset with a pair of long linear water features with integrated seat walls that weave between the existing trees, drawing park users toward the interior of Depot and Veterans Memorial Field. New rain gardens capture and filter stormwater from adjacent buildings, and catenary lights crisscross the space to create a charming, welcoming atmosphere. A deck is constructed around the large existing trees on the northwest side to protect the root zone and to create an elevated seating area. For Depot Park, the area between pedestrian park to Depot Park is enhanced with the elevated table top crossing. So this is where the walkway would cross the parking lot area. That would be a raised tabletop crossing to really provide pedestrians with the right of way, but also slow vehicles through that connection. Special pavers, visitors between the large and signature tree. There's an elevated planter and a step seating area with a summer water play area. On the right, there's a lawn, not that you can see it now, but you will in a minute. There's a lawn area, some step seating slopes with a covered gathering space with a winter fire feature that doubles as a stage for performances or events. All lights are hanging from above, all lit with hanging lights. To the north, new rain gardens buffer outdoor dining seating areas with the adjacent parking lot. And over at the senior center, the new senior center entrance is open and expanded to accommodate major east-west connection between the Depot Park and Veterans Memorial Field. To the east, the new plaza offers a covered gathering space with flexible seating, night lighting, areas to sit around existing trees, a new shuffleball or bocce courts, existing ADA parking spaces, and memorial flagpole will be relocated with the new pads. Sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied tonight. So this is all of those elements collectively. As you will see, this is far out of our budget. So what we did is we broke it into three. But you can see how all of these spaces really start connecting when you kind of step back holistically, how one project leads to another, how we're really, from Depot, really accenting that connection over to Depot Park, to pedestrian park. And then also right now at the senior center, there's a couple of parking spots right here, but by removing those few parking spots and really creating a nice, strong access, really promoting activity. If you've ever walked between there, it's really not a pleasant or intuitive experience. And so we're really trying to clean up some of that clutter in there. Right now, the senior center has a little patio back here, but it's hidden behind walls. It's very private. You can't see over it into the play area. So how can we really start opening this side of the senior center up, provide some outdoor recreational space for the senior center, as well as gathering space, and really make them feel more part of the park. Also, as part of that, coming off this area here would be a trail connection, an additional ADA trail connection into the existing play area. So with that, let's start drilling into each space a little bit more. So pedestrian park. As we talked about, this would be that raised wood area with the existing trees out in there being kept. You can see the crisscross of these yellow dots here are catenary lighting. We'd have 2 linear water features that would kind of draw you through the space, but something you could interact with. We'd have some planters in and around the space and transition, and then a nice rain garden to help with our stormwater management.
If I can add real quick, Jen, those trees are really, those really strong maples provide a really nice canopy and have a really nice feel. How do we accentuate that? Yeah.
This space right now currently has a trellis right in the middle of it and really is visually kind of stops you within that space. So by opening this up and providing a connection, this project is about 1.8 to 2.1 million. There's a lot of wiggle room within these pricings, but this is our best shot in the dark at the moment. So as we move over to Depot, this has a little broader price range of 4 to 4.8 million. But this can also be trimmed down relatively easily. Having worked with the ad hoc committee, we had looked at some areas that we would rather focus on, if not. But we still feel this is doable within the available funds. This area, we'll start at the top here. This is the Depot Museum right now and the train cars, and really provide some outdoor flexible seating in here, provide some rain gardens for stormwater. Over in this area, as we come from pedestrian park, we'd use this tabletop crossing, we'd elevate it and really create that consistent connection piece. We'd have a nice landmark tree here with some seating and gathering space around that. And we'd also have a seasonal water feature over on this side. To be able to really draw people in. Water is an automatic magnet for space. We'd also, keeping the kind of the same roof line and perspective of Depot, and create a new space out in here that would be covered, and maybe an elevated platform that you could do for performances and people could sit and gather out in there, and maybe even include an outdoor fire pit that can be used. They're very popular these days. And how can we really enhance the downtown area, and when people get their dinner, go out and provide them a space to gather and use. The way the space is currently doesn't function too terribly well. We keep the existing train signal and the existing little building that's out there as kind of that, honor of what has been of years past, and bring some of that history into the space. And then on to the next one. This is really focusing in and around the senior center. So out there was, as I mentioned in the front here, there's a couple of parking spaces that come real close. We would get rid of those and enhance the connection with concrete or a paving path, but we'd do a rolled curb. So there would be a really soft transition into the asphalt. So this could be used as more of a drop off or a loading zone than what it currently is, but it would have bollards for pedestrian access and safety. We'd also relocate the sign, the monument sign that's out there, and the flagpole. We'd create new seating, covered area, and provide some outdoor lighting. Also, we've got some activity courts over here, maybe bocce, maybe shuffleboard, whatever other activities might be out there. Cornhole. Yeah. What's the other one with the golf balls? That's fun too.
A ladder ball.
Ladder ball, that's it. So we keep some of the existing trees out there, a lot of the existing trees, and just really start enhancing that space for gathering. As I mentioned, we'd add a new ADA route into the play area, and we'd relocate those ADA spaces just a little closer. That they're currently up in here, we just move them right here so there's easier access into the building, but really open up the front of the senior center and make it more welcoming, not only for the users on the inside, but also those in the park that may want to interact with the users.
Improve that relationship between the senior center and the park and really create some multi-generational connection. Yeah.
Correct. So in summary,
I'm sorry.
Yes.
A hand just was raised.
Oh.
Danielle just raised her hand.
Thank you. Danielle?
Is the intent for these like the shuffleboard and bocce ball and stuff to be used just by members of the senior center, or is that intended to be that anyone in the
all ages?
from the
Yeah,
public
the
can
thought
use
is it would feel it's a park element, right?
So anybody could use them?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Great, thanks.
So when we looked at, here's kind of a summary of all of the different projects and where they are cost-wise. I do want to back up and just quickly mention, as we looked at these, the ad hoc committee wanted to see what we could do to get to 4 million on some of these smaller projects. We do have some ideas as to how that can happen, leading into other spaces, but it was just too much for tonight's conversation to bring that in. So, but just wanted to let you know, ad hoc, we did go through that exercise and have good focus should we pick any of these that maybe aren't at the 4 million mark already. So collectively, this is what we're looking at as our summary. Confluence Park at the 2.8 to 3 million, Dog Park being 600,000 to 650, Pedestrian Park 1.8 to 2.1, the Depot Park being 4 million to 4.8 million, and the Senior Center 2 to 2.3 million. Just to kind of help envision how some of these spaces might look, our consultant team went to some very famous and popular outdoor spaces to kind of get the brain going and get you excited about what could be. You know, it's one thing to look at a colored sketch, but to be able to envision how this might fit in Depot Park, or this is Vancouver, Washington. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. They are in your packet, but we'll just quickly browse through them at how water can be interactive. It can be for all ages. It can come in various shapes and levels of activity within the space.
Yeah, so the thought is not a spray park. It's really water, you know, in these urban park settings, how does a water feature become interactive? Right, and so it's, yeah.
But also draw you
in,
make you want to stay, make you want to engage, and be a new water element that we don't have within our park system or our public spaces, really.
Yeah. Lots of really creative ways to do that.
You know, and night use and lighting, a lot of our spaces aren't very active at night. We're kind of a quiet town. We kind of roll up at night, and starting to change as the population is starting to change. And here's some examples of how some of these spaces could really be incentivized and activated in the night hours in some of our different locations. But just, you know, how nice some stairs can be for gathering, or, you know, sitting around a tree. And then here's some nice open plaza boardwalks areas that you really start feeling those connections that draw you in, like, oh yeah, I can walk that way. It's going to take me somewhere. It's not a little sidewalk that you're following. It's this big expanse that says, yeah, I want to go visit that, or what's at the other end, right? Or, you know, I feel safe walking through this space. And how can we really create that civic gathering connection and provide opportunities to engage differently with other residents. Here's a nice little water feature up at Whistler. Jeff actually just took this picture. This top one. Photo credit, Jeff Watley. But you can see how just a water feature built into an urban space really changes the feel of that environment. But how small fire or big fire pits, can really start, make people want to sit around, gather, even though we're rainy a lot of the year and we're dark a lot of the year, fire's one way to start providing outdoor activity for people, because we get those nice days. You still want to go outside even in the wintertime. And here are some other, just some larger expanses of paving, different textures, colors, and how they can look. But you can see how catenary lighting really starts creating that activity level within a space. Like, oh, I can be here, I can hang out, I can linger in using those. And then fire, with water comes fire, right?
Did you stop by Langley on your way up? Is that how?
Yeah.
It wasn't my photo, but yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm the guy who goes on vacation, and my wife looks at me like, "You're working right now, aren't you?" Sorry. Yeah.
So just real quick, how even shapes, just like a little seat wall, can provide, opportunities for recreation or engagement within a space, patterning, some ideas that we as a group and the design team and the ad hoc were starting to kind of filter through as they help pick some of these precedent images as to what these spaces could be like. Just another outdoor gathering space, but how patterning of materials can really create a neat, welcoming atmosphere. And then when we look at playgrounds, just some of the options that resonated with the ad hoc, these are just ideas that are cool and unique. That might be something different we could provide in our park system. Climbing rocks was also something we had heard about, and maybe how do we add some more climbing features?
Specifically bouldering.
Yes.
So Jen, maybe as your, oh, look at that.
We're wrapping. Yeah. So City Council is seeking park board feedback and rationale as to how best to invest that $4 million of ARPA funding in Issaquah Park project. So we have 2 questions for you. Does the matrix and the 3 focus area concepts represent the park board rationale for making this ARPA investment? And then also, is there a preference on one or more of these projects as to how best to spend the money?
And if I can just, I think, as those questions are asked, just how this is going to get framed, right? So council just started their budget process. So you might remember from that July meeting, council feedback to the mayor as she proposed this $4 million was that council would really like to consider this during the budget process. So, sort of based on discussion tonight, and I know time check, I don't know if everyone's comfortable maybe staying an extra 20 minutes or 30 minutes. We'd want to check that. Taking your feedback and your thoughts and really having a chance to sit down with the mayor and then think through probably sometime in October how this work gets melded or gets put into council conversation and council consideration. So
before we open it up, I want to give the ad hoc chance to speak to anything that I may have missed in your presenting all of your work and your ideas.
Just kudos to the law firm of Andrew, Arlene, and Chris.
Yeah, it's been a lot of great time, so thank you.
I thought it was a great summary, Jen. Thanks. One of my big takeaways from it was this idea of how much do we try to separate it or pare things back or pare things down or separate it into different elements so that we could create more of a a la carte options of reaching that $4 million. But I think it was Marlene made the good point of that route versus providing something that's a little bit more polished and complete looking so that we don't get into a situation where we end up with a halfway solution and then it never feels quite done or never feels quite as good as it might have been. And also the analysis paralysis that comes with extending, like separating it into many different decisions rather than presenting, a couple of really strong options, and keeping it at that higher level, the spectacle level versus, taking it down a few notches.
So making the investment in one place as opposed to spreading it out.
Yeah.
I just don't want to get too cute about sequencing. I don't know, maybe it's my own personal, like, once you start a project, if you try to piecemeal it too much, you live in your own remodel forever. And I just don't want us to do that as a part. Like, I think part of ARPA funding was to be impactful and complete. And so I just want to make sure that, I think we all have, best intentions to say, well, if we could do a little bit here and a little bit here, and maybe we can do that water feature later. I don't know, then later's
20 years.
How far later, right? So I guess that was just something that I felt strongly about, that even if it's, I'd rather do one thing really well than try to do a whole bunch of things partially.
Is everybody comfortable going an extra 20, 30 minutes over? Okay.
I'm seeing head nods.
Seems like we're all good on that front. I'm not sure who had their hand up first, Brad or Danielle.
Yeah, you gotta call on somebody.
It was a competition. But I'm happy to go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a few comments and thoughts. One, from the perspective, I was a member of the Capital Finance Task Force, and one of the things that we talked about in terms of usage of ARPA funds is to have the greatest impact. And so really falls in line with Marlene's comment about consolidating those funds into one project rather than distributing out as an a la carte kind of thing. And then looking at the numbers distribution, it really kind of focuses on Depot Park, in my opinion, as probably the best advocate for that element. I really like the idea of Confluence Park finishing out that phase, but it does kind of not use up all the money, and it's also not something I think that is the greatest area of impact that would be done in Veterans Memorial. I think spending $600,000 on a half an acre dog park does not make a lot of sense. I would rather us defer that investment to something that would have a greater area. Plus, it's an a la carte deal. So veterans really perform the best in the matrix, although it's a little marginal. Confluence was close. But I think that, again, I think that the depot makes the best use of $4 million all in one area, could have the most impact. And I also think, I can't remember if it was David in our last meeting, I think it creates an energy towards something further in the future. And I think the Veterans Memorial is likely, when we get down to the basics of master planning, I think veterans will come down to probably the top priority of the three anchor parks as being where we'll go next. And I think creating a $4 million effort at Depot Park, or a combination of pedestrians and senior center, which also the combination of those two also uses up $4 million. But I think the Depot probably would be my vote, even though I'm not voting here this evening. I think that's where I would be an advocate of consolidating all that money, making the most impact possible on Depot Park, creating some lighting, some water, some fire in the heart of Old Town would really be a great addition to Old Town, and create an incentive for everything else with Veteran Memorial Park in the years to come. So I've used up probably more time than I needed, but that's my 2 cents. Thanks much.
Thanks, Brad. Danielle?
Yes, along the same lines as Brad, but I personally would prioritize doing investments that are bringing kind of new amenities, recreational amenities to our park. So I really like the idea of doing the shuffleboard bocce features by the senior center. I think those are opportunities that the seniors will take advantage of, and those are really fun activities for families too. And we don't have anything else like that in our park system. I think it would be really interesting to get that in and see how it's used, because it might be something that we would want to incorporate in other parks. And by that photo, it's not going to take up a huge footprint and infringe on, whatever future plans are for Veterans Memorial Field. I also would, I think the dog park, we've been talking about it for a really long time. It sounds like that's a location in the temporary dog parks that's been popular. So I personally would do and I'm also not voting, so I'm just throwing in my 2 cents like Brad. But I would encourage us to do the dog park and the senior center improvements. I really would like us to add amenities rather than, I love the idea of the pedestrian park entry, but to me, that's making something look nice rather than adding something that we don't have in an active park. Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle. Chris?
Yeah, thank you. First off, I think I was the first person to use the phrase a la carte, and I apologize. What was intended by that, and where I was hoping we might be able to go, is I saw that we probably weren't going to get to some perfect magic $4 million project that everyone liked, but I could see where we might, let's say we got to a 3.3 and then decided to do the dog park for 6 or something like that. That's really where I was leaning with that use of that word. So we can throw it away now because it doesn't carry the same meaning for everybody. Having walked through the process and what Jennifer presented, the table with the matrix with the green, the red, the yellow, and the one orange, we walked through the fully expanded version of that. And the one thing that kept resonating with me was the economic impact that's really intended with this money, and also the community impact. And for that reason, I really lean towards pedestrian park. And this is where that word that I'm not going to use anymore, that phrase, comes in. Is my thought was, well, if pedestrian park was like I forget what number it is, but a 2 point something, how far could we get into Depot and get to 4 million and do it properly, like Marlene said, not a halfway job that leaves us living in our remodel. But how far could we get into there, or could we get in a portion of that across that raised what do you call it,
Tabletop.
pedestrian crossing? And then this is where that other word is, but maybe we now consider putting in on the other side of the senior center those amenities that Danielle mentioned, an affinity for. And the main reason is, I love all these parks and would love to see them all happen, but we can't do them all. And the economic and the community impact is the one you're going to see from that, the most traveled intersection in our city, I think, is, right there at the pedestrian park. And to make that into something that really attracts a lot of people, and people to come and either huddle around a fire in the winter or hang out and have their ice cream or their yogurt in the summer. I think that's going to be the huge impact, in both economically and from a community perspective. And then to get back to the phrase that someone else used, have it be a catalyst or an energizer, an accelerator for the rest of Memorial Park and the different smaller parts. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Chris. Tim?
Thank you. I just, if I'm correct, the original request from council was to make a big impact in one place rather than distribute over multiple places. And if I'm remembering that correctly, then I think that, the sentiment about basically pouring all the water into one pot is the right way to go, because that's what we were told that was the vision and the goal of what to do with this money. And so I would be in favor of doing that. And I am not in favor of funding the dog park. So having said that, several options line up with that I think would be wonderful. And I'm actually okay with any of those because I think they'd all be great.
Thanks, Tim. Anyone else? Any comments? Nicholas?
Yeah, I mean, I will second Chris and Tim in the senses for me, it's a bit of an equity play, and it's also a bit of a strategic advantage for the city from an economic perspective. When you want to live somewhere and you want to age in place, having a really robust senior center is important, both for yourself as you think about yourself in the future, but as you want to slight your parents nearby potentially. And I think our senior center is tired. I ran into our mayor on a walk down, our former mayor on a walk down there. And the one thing he mentioned to me was, it'd really be nice to be able to get outside and play some, actually he mentioned racquetball, which is apparently like a sport born in Washington, Mercer Island. Pickleball, yeah. He mentioned that. And I know that, our neighbors on the north end of the lake, Redmond, they have a significant investment starting right now in their senior center for the same reason, as they want to attract families that want to live, multi-generationally in this area. So that's my feeling. And I think that stretches through 3 parks that we just saw, our 3 phases of park. And council doesn't have to stop at 4 million. We just got to put the chit down on the table. Excuse me, CHIT.
I heard that.
Yeah, and let them follow with other money. So, and I love dogs as much as I love, people, but at some point that is just another fight for another day, another question for another day. So thank you.
Okay, so
just a question for me. I know we talked a lot about like water features and things, and I think someone had brought it up in a previous meeting about maintenance cost and ongoing total cost of ownership. Is that would putting in all these water features would kind of significantly go up? You're talking about pumps and lighting, and have we done analysis around that? Or?
Yeah. So when we did all the rough order of magnitude costs, we worked with a professional team, and we're like, okay. When we came up with those numbers for each of those features, we were thinking of those things and drainage and where's the nearest electrical, is there gas over here, things like that. So when we put those numbers together to come up with those round numbers, we had some of that general consideration.
No, it's a great question, David. Yeah, and there's some really thoughtful ways to design water features that they don't need the massive pumps and the right? That can be relatively simple. Don't need the sanitation because it's not a spray park, right? So we'd want to really think through both design and how it looks and how people will interact with it. But you're right. What's the maintenance responsibility look like? Should we move forward with it?
And some of those water features too can shift and be, depending upon what it is, could shift and be a unique winter element as well too.
It's not running in the winter, so
either it's not running or you can cover them and have them lit, or there's other things you could do with some of those.
I actually fully agree with what you're saying. I like it, the downtown, and keeping it there and keeping the money there. And you're right, the dog park is a good idea for another time. And then you just had a flash in my head as you mentioned the water feature. You're going to have to control all of the suds and the bubbles that will go in every night. So there's going to be a
Yeah, but hopefully when you get enough people around, it's a little harder to do.
Positive public spaces. Well, great discussion. Looking at the time, I guess I just want to bring us back to that initial ask by council in July. Right. And so, I'm certainly hearing it. So appreciate the discussion, the rationale and the work to say, all right, how and where could this specific form, remember this, that's not any 4 million, it's 4 million that has a shot clock on it that has some federal requirements attached to it. Where could we invest that? I think these three focus areas that we discussed last month, that the ad hoc team and us as staff really started to work on are all pretty compelling. I'm hearing some consensus around veterans and some combination thereof within this Veterans Consolidated Park. You know, again, I think to present back to council, one, the matrix that took this from just anywhere to here's how we really took this and these primary community parks of the Creek Corridor, of Veterans, of Tibbetts, and Confluence that the council wanted us to add. Here's some ideas we came up with, and we as a group like all three, but we feel like, you know, a preference of sorts is veterans, is what I'm hearing. Again, I think there's going to be more discussion. I think the mayor's going to really want some community discussion around this. I guess I could put something together as a motion that sort of speaks to that. But before I do that, does that encapsulate what I heard?
Veterans Memorial seems to be the consensus of the three, I believe.
And
At
I
least
like,
some iteration.
yeah, sorry, Mark.
Oh.
I was gonna say, I like too that we aren't getting, you know, as a team, like all the way down to pedestrian, because I think also for the council, letting them also engage the community or do some other, like, to really sort of see from a heat map perspective, that once we get more feedback, to sort of hone into that area, but not be so prescriptive, I think is probably to our benefit.
Yeah, and even including dog park and Confluence as like, these are things that we considered and could be potential, and showing some of that thinking, I think helps round it out too.
Right, all three, and then showing, sort of speaking to this preference of Old Town veterans. I would agree, Marley. I guess I would, from a park planning perspective and big picture, and knowing there's this conversation we started before the pandemic about Veterans Memorial and unifying to Front Street. And, you know, I think all three of those areas, PED, Depot, Senior Center, and really the value all three, and the compelling unification. Now suddenly there's literally a public bridge, a stroll to the Memorial Field. That's always sort of felt like it's, you know, back in the corner. And so, yeah, really compelling, I think, to sort of present it all. See where it goes.
Okay. So I think we want to come to a consensus as a Parks Board with regards to presenting Veterans Memorial Park and the other three options that we sort of funneled it down to. And so would anybody like to propose a motion?
I jotted down some
I was gonna say,
really.
somebody else
I jotted down some
Somebody
super
else
fast
did.
language. This is not, I mean, please, I'm presenting this to, I'm not making the motion since I'm not a board member, but here's some language that you can maybe start to play with. We as the park board support the rationale, evaluation, and determination of these three focus areas identified for the $4 million community investment strategy park project, with our preferred area being Veterans Memorial Consolidated Park. Maybe leave it at that.
So moved.
And if that.
You gotta
make the motion, and then Tish, I suppose I could play with Tisha on. Does that?
Yes.
That seems to encapsulate it.
Yeah.
Clarifying question, when you say the three focus areas, is that the depot?
Three focus areas being the Confluence Park, Dog Park,
Okay.
and so it's sort of starting with the matrix.
Okay.
That led to these three, and maybe
Okay.
focus areas isn't the right, three park ideas, three park areas.
Geographies.
But then of those three, the preferred is Veterans Memorial.
Danielle wants to make a motion.
Yeah, there we go.
Danielle, is your
Danielle.
hand still up, or do you
Your
have a new
hand?
question?
Oh, no, sorry. I forgot to.
Okay.
But just as a point of clarification, I mean, Veterans Memorial Park is more of the feel. I mean, like, I think you might want to clarify that you're talking about.
Yeah, and
not
that's
actually the
again,
field part.
Right. So again, I'm suggesting, and I think we called it this a couple of times throughout this process, Veterans Memorial Consolidated Park, meaning, I mean, we could do the list, pedestrian park, depot park, senior center. We could do that as well.
Can we rebrand, like, like separate it from Veterans Field? Because I know there's issues there. Like, are those the, like, Old Town community spaces, or like, is there something else?
We could just call them pedestrian park, depot park, and senior center.
Okay.
I think that makes
that's
a lot
way
of
to
sense.
do it as well. Yeah.
Because then you're not going to have somebody read the minutes and think that perhaps
Yeah,
some
this
action was taken.
doesn't
Right.
include the field. Yeah, that's a great point.
And
Yeah.
we could always, you know, rebrand the space at a future date to needed, you know,
Mhm.
or rename that space.
Old Town Road.
There you
All right, make the motion. So we can-
I don't know how to make a motion that
Just what he
complicated.
said.
I moved-
Wish I had it.
Is there a second? Yeah.
Did somebody, so I just replaced Veterans Memorial Field and to list the three distinct pieces, so someone can just say they'd like to move that.
You move and I'll second.
Yeah, so moved. I'll move that.
Okay.
Okay, any further discussion with regards to the proposed motion? Okay, well, in that case, we will proceed similar to the last one, where I call your name and just say whether you approve the motion or not. Chris?
I support and approve it.
Okay, Marlene?
Support.
And I support. Andrew?
Yes, in favor.
Okay, David?
Support.
Nicholas?
Support.
Brenda?
Support.
Katie?
Support.
Tim?
Support.
All right. It's,
And Brad and Danielle, thank you for your feedback as well.
all right, so it appears unanimous that the board approves the
That's
motion.
great. Again, and Jennifer, great work. The Methuen team, great work. Andrew, Marlene, Chris, thank you so much for your time and energy. I will get it. This is very helpful. I'll have a chance to talk to administration and get a sense of, all right, how do we carry this into the budget process with council? So once I learn that, I'll reach out to you, Zach, or to the ad hoc committee to maybe help us sit down with the mayor and sort of talk through the process and how we want to present that to council. So more to come there. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so moving on to the chair and director's reports. So my report is very salmon centric report. So obviously this weekend is the salmon days, the 1st and 2nd. There will also be a Release the Kokanee event that will be occurring, I believe it's at Lake Sammamish. Then there's also a Run with the Kokanee event. There's a 5K and 10K race benefiting the Kokanee salmon recovery work. That is on October 15th. And then also there is some eco action classes being hosted here in Issaquah at the Depot Museum, actually. Those start on October 19th, and I believe the first one is reducing your waste and less toxicity in the environment. And I believe that's like 3 separate classes that extend through the fall. So if you're interested in that, that is on the Issaquah newsletter. That's all for me.
That's cool. Director's report was going to be long. It's not long anymore. Budget, as I've said, you've heard me say it a couple times, the 2023-2024 budget has been presented to council. We had the first workshop with council last night. There'll be multiples throughout October. If I sent you the link to the budget, if you want to take a look at Parks and Community Services, our operations asks or our capital asks, if you have any questions, please throw them my way. Happy to answer them, but certainly appreciate a lot of support from mayor and administration in terms of what we're doing throughout the department, and look forward to that discussion with council.
All right.
One more. Yeah. I have some swag before you leave. Not really swag.
Nice.
The Trails Map 2.0 is out on the streets. I've got some copies for you. Fun little QR code on the back, so easily downloadable to your phone. For those that are super tech savvy, you can actually sync this to a geolocation and use the Trails Map as you're tromping through the Alps. So exciting. I'll get those right now if you guys are adjourned.
Thank you. Okay, so meeting adjourned.
Good job.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Digital trail
Copies
map. Thanks.
If you're interested.
Take one down, pass it around.
Yeah.
Do you have, do we need to get an IF rep back here? Issaquah Youth Advisory Board member?
Yeah, I will check.